Hi horn players! Today we're going to dive deep into a discussion on alternate fingerings. This is a good time for me to remind you that I like to play my scales with standard fingerings based on the registers we would normally play on each side of the horn. So that's B flat horn for our A flat in the staff and above. Below that we have G down to the F sharp below middle C. That's all generally on the F side of the horn. From our low F down to the D flat above the low C, we have a little pocket of B flat horn down there. Then the last section of F horn, which is from low C down to low F sharp, F1, 2, and 3, and then the last pocket of B flat horn, which is pedal F and below. The reason I like to play my scales with those fingerings is so that I can touch base every day with the characteristic horn tone that we expect to hear in those registers and with the standard pitch we expect to hear in those registers. But today we're talking about alternate fingerings. Alternate means something other than usual. So I'm going to give you reasons you might use an alternate fingering and reasons you might not, so that you can make judicious decisions about when and where you should deviate from the norm. But to begin, we're going to look at where alternate fingerings come from. Plus, I'm going to show you every possible fingering available on every single note of our instrument and how to figure out those fingerings for yourself. I encourage you to have your horn out and stop the video at any point to try out our different harmonic series, alternate fingerings, or anything else that you would like to try. Today I'm going to introduce you to the harmonics fingering chart. But what we'll look at first isn't the harmonics fingering chart just yet. This is an illustration of all the notes we can play on each fingering, or the harmonic series for each fingering. You already know that this is where our valve combinations come from. When I press F open, I can play 15 of the 16 notes in the concert F harmonic series, which to us in horn pitch looks like C. Then I can press F2, which adds a half step of length to my instrument, and I can play 15 of the 16 harmonics in the concert E harmonic series. We call that horn an E, but to us on paper it looks like the notes are from B major, horn pitch wise. Then I can press down F1 and get 15 notes based on concert E flat. So already I have almost 3 times the number of pitches available compared to just playing that first harmonic series. So this is F open. And then F2. And then F1. I say almost because now some of the pitches are starting to overlap, meaning I can play some of those notes using both F open and F1. Then I can keep going with other harmonic series like horn in D on 1 and 2, horn in D flat on 2 and 3, horn in C on 1 and 3, and horn in B natural on 1, 2, and 3. Then you also know that we have a whole other set of 7 valve combinations from our smaller instrument, the B flat horn. So on my B flat opening fingering, that is horn in B flat alto, meaning it plays the concert B flat harmonic series, and the alto part means up, as opposed to B flat basso, which when we're transposing, for instance, would be down. But right now we're not talking about transposing, we're talking about using our crooks or our valve slides, so that our harmonic series are available in different keys. On the B flat horn, I can play all 16 notes in each harmonic series because I can get all the way down to the fundamental. B flat 2 is horn in A, so it plays in A concert. That's our key of E, horn pitch E. B flat 1 is horn in A flat, our key of E flat. B flat 1 and 2 is horn in G, our key of D. If you were playing something like early classical, Haydn symphony, maybe where horn players weren't using hand horn technique yet, and let's say it was horn in G, you could literally put down your thumb 1 and 2 and play the whole thing. Once you get to thumb 1 and 3 and thumb 1, 2, and 3, which is horn in E, you can tell just by hearing those names that we've seen those harmonic series before. Thumb 1 and 3 has the same harmonic series as F open. They're both the same length instrument. They're long enough to play in the concert key of F if you're just playing the open harmonics. So feel free to stop the video and try this out. Play the open notes that come out on F open, and then play the open notes that come out on B flat 1 and 3. They're exactly the same pitches. So that means that any note that can be played F open can also be played B flat 1 and 3. Now try the same trick with F2 and B flat 1, 2, and 3. I'm not sure how useful this is in general because B flat 1 and 3 and B flat 1, 2, and 3 are a lot clunkier fingerings than FO or F2. And also they're kind of long fingerings on a shorter instrument, which means the tone isn't super great. But one place it is useful is in our Mozart Concerti, where a lot of people like to use a B flat 1 and 3 trill on their horn pitch C. That's B flat 1 and 3. So once I make a harmonics chart like the one I've been showing you on screen, then I can write out every chromatic pitch on our instrument, basically a fingering chart, and fill in which fingerings can play each note. Basically, I'm going to take the resulting pitches in each overtone series and record that fingering as a possible alternate fingering for all the notes that are in that series. You may have noticed on the harmonics chart that I put some notes in parentheses, and those are the harmonics 7 and 11, which are not true pitches, at least in our system of tonality. There are some others in the upper register that aren't exact, but these are the big ones. So on the harmonics fingering chart, I also put those fingerings in brackets just to let me know that they're not the most reliable alternate fingerings for that note. There are some interesting takeaways I want to share with you. As we talked about before, there are 14 possible fingering combinations on a double horn, but only 12 available harmonic series. That's because the F open and the B flat 1 and 3 double each other, as do the F2 and the B flat 1, 2, and 3. As I also mentioned, on the high end, our instrument has available harmonics all the way up to super high F above high C, but please, for the sake of the health of your face, take years to try to get up there. As for the low end, it's interesting. In the B flat horn harmonic series, in the bass clef, there's a blank spot where there are no B flat fingerings available, and a blank spot where there are no F fingerings available. Those blank spots happen between the fundamental and the second harmonic on each side of the horn, where there's an octave between the notes that you can play using the same fingering. So basically, if we didn't have both sides of our horn, we would be missing the ability to play like big chunks of notes down here. This also means that in general, at the bottom of the overtone series, the notes have fewer alternate fingerings because the available harmonics on each crook are fewer and further between. But let's look up in the stratosphere, and there are many alternate fingerings available for each pitch, and some notes even have a dozen fingering options. That's why it's sometimes easy to play the right note in the high register, even though maybe you accidentally put down the wrong fingers, because maybe the fingering you put down was one of 12 possible fingerings for that note. Not all of the alternate fingerings available are good alternate fingerings. I had a student do an independent study with me on the physical development of the horn. She's now an instrument tech in Carson City, Nevada. One of the things we did was tune every alternate fingering, even those super high ones. So we literally played not just every note, but every note with all of its possible fingerings on the instrument. There are a couple of decent options we found that aren't in common use, but not many, to be honest. And those options had way better other options. Lots of the fingerings were compromised in terms of tone, especially the ones where you use like the most tubing. I didn't keep a copy of her tuning chart on every fingering because there are so many individual playing aspects that will also affect whether a particular fingering suits a particular pitch for one player over another player. Basically, my alternate fingering tuning chart will be different from hers and from yours, etc., because one person's playing techniques versus another's are different. But I'm going to tell you the most commonly used alternate fingerings, the ones that are pretty dependable for almost everyone. Here are some good uses for alternate fingerings. They can make fast passages easier. They can help you play smoother slurs. They can help you find the right intonation for a chord. And they can help you achieve different tone colors. Here's an easy rule for using the harmonic series to make your slurs easier. If you're slurring up, it's easier to slur up when you're subtracting your tubing. When you're going down, it's the opposite. Slurs are easier when you add tubing if you're going down. So let's try that out together. Grab your horn and let's try to slur up from third space C, trigger open, up to D, trigger 1 and 2. And it can be kind of bumpy. But try B, trigger 2, up to C with trigger open. Much easier, right? So now let's try going down. Slur from A flat below the staff, F2 and 3, down to G, F open. That's one of the bumpiest places on our instrument. So we're going to take away lots of tubing, which is not what we want going down. But try that same G, F open, down to the F sharp. Down to 2. Here we're going to add tubing and it makes it much easier. So here's how an alternate fingering can make a sticky spot easier. If I'm trying to slur from F in the staff, that's F1, down to E, which is F open, that's going to be bumpy going either up or down, but usually it's bumpiest going up. So just for kicks, let's try that E as F1 and 2. This combination is much smoother. Now I'm not usually going to play that F1 and 2 because I have another really good possibility, and that's to use the B flat horn. We're going from B flat open on the F down to B flat 2, also adds tubing rather than subtracting it. I really like the tone right there, but there is a pitch trade-off with both of those options. And there commonly is a pitch trade-off with alternate fingerings. So if you can adequately adjust for the pitch with your hand or by lipping it, which is really a tongue position adjustment, then alternate fingerings can be really useful options in a lot of circumstances. Should you play these notes with these fingerings all the time? No. A lot of the time, your standard fingerings will provide the best tone and intonation. These are for special circumstances in the music, carefully and deliberately chosen for all of the reasons we listed above. There are certain alternate fingerings that I use more commonly, but most of them I use only on occasion, and then I also take a little while to decide if I actually like it. Also, I write alternate fingerings into my part so that I always remember that choice. Additionally, if I'm playing a note where I might commonly use an alternate fingering, but I decided to use the standard fingering, then I will write in the standard fingering to remind myself that that option sounds better. A good example is high A, which I often play on trigger open. If I decide to play at trigger 1 and 2, I'll write that in so that, even 10 years from now, when I play that piece again, I'll know that trigger 1 and 2 just worked better in that spot. Here are some of the most common alternate fingerings. Most common alternate fingerings involve using the B flat side of the horn for a note that you would usually play on the F side, most often around the bottom of the treble clef staff. Why? Well, you get better projection on the B flat horn in that register. It has better slurring because of the adding tubing if you're going down. There's easy fingering in a fast passage, and what's the trade-off? It's usually going to be sharp. You might occasionally use an F horn fingering for something that would commonly be played on the B flat horn, but that's pretty rare. I'm thinking of circumstances where you're in like the low register between low F and the D flat below that, and maybe you want to play something softly. It might be easier to do that on the F horn than on the B flat horn. Trigger 3 as a substitute for trigger 1 and 2 combinations are probably the most common alternate fingering. As I've said before, the combined first and second slides aren't quite long enough to play the harmonic series low enough compared to the harmonic series on open first or second valve individually. So trigger 3 is a good alternative and often helps with fast passages as well. I especially like trigger 3 on the Ds in Mozart arpeggios because these works are usually in our key of B flat major, and D is the third of that tonic chord. So we like our thirds to be a little flat, and that makes them sound warm instead of kind of brash. T3 is an especially great option in this case. TO and T2 for high A and high A flat. These are flatter options for those notes, but they may not be useful in all circumstances. On almost every high A or high A flat in my music, I'll test out the regular option, 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, and the alternate option, TO or T2, and then write in the fingering that I like best in the music. T1 and 2 and T1 for high F sharp and G. These fingerings are almost exclusively useful for fast passages. The T1 for the G is going to be a flatter fingering than T open, which may sometimes be useful because in terms of pitch, that T open wants to kind of head sharp pitch-wise. So T1 and 3 on C in the treble staff for lip trills, which we talked about earlier before. The same thing is true for F1 and 3 on G in the staff for lip trills. We have two commonly used systems of intonation in modern classical music. One system is called equal temperament, developed in the 1500s in China, and it was popularized in Europe in the 1700s. Equal temperament is a system of tuning in which the octave is divided into 12 semitones that are equally spaced apart from one another. This system of intonation is used largely in fixed pitch instruments like piano, harp, keyboard percussion, organ. Bach famously wrote a set of 24 preludes and fugues called the Well-Tempered Clavier, and that was to feature the use of this tuning system on the keyboard instruments of his day. If the piano was tuned using something approximating equal temperament, then you could play in every key, and each key would sound pretty decently in tune. The previous tuning system used in Bach's time involved adjusting the fifths and thirds on a keyboard instrument so that they sounded best in one key and maybe in a closely related key that only had one note difference, like C major and F major. Unfortunately, this means that, say, C major, F major, and maybe B flat major might all sound pretty good, but G major, A major, etc. would sound terrible. So equal temperament fixed that to a large degree. But there is something lost with equal temperament, and that's the natural inclination of pitches based on their position, their role in the overtone series. As you can tell from playing our harmonic series, not all overtones are natural, like half, semitones, half steps of a chromatic scale. Some overtones, like fifths, want to be sharp. Some overtones, like thirds and flat sevenths, want to be flat. And as we've discovered, some overtones don't even want to conform to the definition of a true pitch in our Western tonality. So these overtone tendencies actually add to the richness of the fundamental pitches that we hear. These days, savvy wind instrumentalists tend to practice what we call just intonation, also known as pure intonation. That means adjusting the pitch of notes that you're playing based on your function in the chord, not based on where in tune would be on your tuner. And the amount you're going to adjust it is something that we'll reference from the harmonic series. I have the tonal energy tuner and it has a just intonation function, so I'll play you two chords. The first uses equal temperament and the second uses just intonation, meaning that the fifth of that chord will be a little sharp and the third will be a little flat. So here's the equal temperament. Let's see. Oh, sorry. I hope you can hear this on this mic. And then here is the just intonation. And I'm just going to switch back to the equal temperament. And then back to the just intonation. So to me, the equal temperament chord sounds like kind of fake. I mean, it has some weird sound wave clashes in it. It almost sounds a little bit, it sounds really like a synthesizer, or I always think equal temperament chords sound like a bus horn. The thirds are just so wide. But the just intonation chords sound, to me, very warm and stable. Let's do an experiment together. Grab your horn and your tuner. First, tune your G in the staff. Aim for directly in the middle of the note. And then we're going to see if we can find a drone function on your tuner. So I'm going to set my drone to our middle C. Okay. All right. So that's concert F, horn pitch C. Choose the one that sounds in the same octave as middle C. Now while the drone is playing, switch over to your tuner and try to play that G again exactly in the middle of the pitch. Match the tuner. Don't be louder than the C. See if you can be a little softer. Now, try to play that G just a little bit sharp. You can kind of aim up with your tongue position, or you can open your hand. You're still going to use a little less volume than the C. I hope you can tell the difference in that second one. It sounded a lot better to me here in the room. I'm not sure what you guys can hear there. Let's try a couple more. We'll keep that C drone as our root, but this time we're going to play an E. Try to play your E so it matches the tuner exactly, and then let your pitch, while you're playing, let your pitch drift south until you like it. And your E is going to be quite a bit softer than the C. So that's a major third, which we want to lower. You can do that by lipping down, which is probably more just like using a lower vowel position. Or you can cover your bell, which will lower the pitch. And then what about minor thirds? So you've got your C drone. This time let's play an E flat. Try to play it, first of all, in tune with the tuner. And then for this one, let's aim up. Again, just until you like it. So you're still going to be playing softer than the C. Yeah, it took me a while to get there, but then I finally got it where I liked it. I think it's interesting that the major third needs to lean down and the minor third needs to lean up, so they're kind of moving toward each other pitch-wise. Now let's do a dominant seventh, a flat seventh. So if I've got this C drone, I'm going to play a B flat. It's part of this chord, a 5-7 chord, if you know your Roman numerals, or sometimes we call it a dominant chord. So we still want to play softer than that C drone. So try to start in tune with the tuner, and then you're going to drift down until you like it. Also, you may be picking up on there's a lot of balance that is important to tuning. I think a lot of times when students think they're out of tune, they might actually be out of balance. The root of a chord should always be the strongest, followed by the fifth. The third should always be the softest, and it can often be even softer than you think. The easiest way, let me turn this off. The easiest way to make a chord sound out of tune is to play a third too loud. And then that seventh that we just played, that should also be softer than everything else. I uploaded this great chart that I inherited from Dr. Mallory Thompson, who's the incredible director of bands at Northwestern University. She gave each of her students a copy of this chart, and I've passed it along to all of my students as well. So this is called the chords of just intonation. So let's take a look at the major chord first. Here it says all chords are based on the root C, which they're going to say is exactly at pitch. So in our major chord, it says that the G should be just a hair sharp, 2 cents sharp, if you're looking at your tuner. And then that the major third should be quite a bit flat, 14 cents flat. In the minor chord right next door, still got that G at 2 cents sharp, so it's not very high, just a little brighter than right on. And then you're looking at, with the minor third, 16 cents sharp. So isn't that interesting that the major third goes down 14 cents and the minor third needs to go up 16 cents. So they are getting a lot closer to each other. And then just for kicks, let's take a look at that diminished next door. So it says that your minor third on the bottom needs to be that 16 cents sharp still, so wide minor third. And then we have another minor third on top, but they say keep that one low. So you want to keep that G flat low. So maybe, even thinking about it in relationship to the C, that you've got this tritone that you're going to kind of keep on the narrow side. Let's skip down the page and look at the dominant seventh chord. So it's the third line down if you're looking at the document on your own, and it's right in the middle. So here we see that the bass chord, the C major triad, is the same as we saw at the beginning. Third, 14 cents flat, the fifth, 2 cents high. But then look how low that seventh needs to be. And remember, it also needs to be the softest, one of the softest notes in the third. This whole just intonation system works best when you're playing with other instruments that are not tuned to equal temperament. For instance, when I'm playing pieces with a pianist, I'm thinking more in equal temperament most of the time. So trying to play more in the center of every note, just like when I'm playing my scales and my warm-ups. But your chamber ensembles are the perfect place to practice just intonation, as is the orchestra for the most part. So what this means is developing your active ear and listening vertically to sonorities or chords that you're a part of. When you reach a cadence, which is a point of rest at the end of a musical phrase, you're often holding either a tonic chord, a 1 chord, or a 5 chord, a dominant chord, as a group. So just ask yourself, am I the root? Am I the third? Am I the fifth? Or if it's a dominant chord, flat seven? Or maybe I'm a minor third? Then play around with the intonation of that chord based on your note's role in the chord. And if it still needs work, then think about the balance. So here's the quick guide to just intonation and balance. The root of a chord is the loudest and in tune. The fifth is the second loudest and it's a little bit sharp. A third is going to be the softest and pretty low if it's major, pretty high if it's minor. And if it's a dominant seventh chord, then the flat seventh is also softer and even lower than the third. One of my favorite books to play from isn't exactly an etude book, but I kind of study from it like it's an etude book. It's Wendell Haas's arrangements for J.S. Bach's cello suites for French horn. This is my very well-loved copy. There are other editions where the horn plays in the original concert key, but this edition will probably always be my favorite. I feel so lucky as a horn player to have sheet music for such wonderful music, especially music by a composer that wrote several great parts for us, but like I said, sadly lived before our instrument was as capable as it is now. Bach wrote mostly church music, and one reason this collection of suites is interesting is because it was secular music, so not written for Bach's work as a church musician. The way we know this is not sacred music is because each of the movements are based on a French Baroque dance form, and they're named after those dance forms. Sarabande, gigue, bourrée, courant, allemande, gavotte. It's funny that these are all French names, and Bach was a German, but he's paying tribute to the form or the compositional structure that he's using. These cello suites have an interesting history beyond Bach. They were pretty much unknown until the early 1900s, and in 1889, a copy was discovered in a thrift shop in Spain by Pablo Casals, who was 13 years old, and he became one of the world's most famous cellists. He didn't record these until he was 60, and his recordings of two of the suites were done at Abbey Road in London, where the Beatles recorded. So I've got for you here the prelude to Bach's Suite for Solo Cello number 2, with your attendance assignment to follow. So enjoy. Everyone in the studio has the same attendance assignment this week. Record yourself playing this short phrase with traditional fingerings, then play it with the notated alternate fingerings and send your recording to myself or to Sean. See you next week for horn class number 8.